The great chamber stretched upward into darkness, its walls carved from stone that had witnessed 10,000 years of galactic law. And Ambassador Alara Vance stood at its center like a single candle flame surrounded by giants. She had walked this path 17 times before, once for every year of her service, and each time the weight of it pressed harder against her chest. Around her rose the seats of the Galactic Council, arranged in ascending circles that climbed toward a ceiling no human eye could see. And in those seats sat beings of such age and power that humanity seemed like children playing at civilization. Valorians occupied the highest tier, their bodies made of flowing silver light that shifted like liquid mercury. And they watched everything with eyes that held no warmth. Below them sat the Creth Dominion, massive creatures of stone and crystal who had built empires when Earth was still cooling from its birth. And their silence carried the weight of mountains. The Ishani Collective filled an entire section with their hive-linked forms, thousands of small bodies moving as one mind, and their chittering whispers echoed through the chamber like wind through dead leaves. Alara kept her spine straight and her face empty of emotion. She had learned long ago that showing feeling in this place was seen as weakness, and humanity could not afford to appear any weaker than the council already believed them to bait. Great bell rang once, a sound that vibrated through bone and soul, and Archon Saluvis rose from his throne at the chamber's peak. He was crystalline, his body a lattice of pale blue light that refracted into rainbows when he moved. And he was older than human civilization by a factor that made counting meaningless. We gather for the 203rd annual recitation of debts. His voice rang out, neither male nor female, but something that simply was. Let the record show that all species are present and accounted for. Alara felt the eyes turn toward her, hundreds of alien gazes carrying judgment and pity and something that might have been contempt. This was the moment she dreaded most, the moment when humanity's shame was spoken aloud for all to hear. The species known as humanity, Saluvis continued, and the word dripped from his crystal lips like something distasteful, currently carries an outstanding debt of 11,700,000,000,000 and 42 million gratitude units. A murmur rippled through the chamber, the same murmur that came every year. A reminder that humanity's debt was the largest ever recorded, at current rates of repayment through labor contracts, military service, and resource contribution. Full settlement will be achieved in approximately 3,812 standard years. Alara did not flinch, though inside her something clenched tight enough to hurt. 3,000 years, she thought. That was what they valued human survival. At 3,000 years of servitude, she remembered the history that every human child learned before they could walk. The story of how humanity had nearly ended 2 centuries ago. A gamma ray burst from a dying star had struck Earth with radiation that stripped away the ozone layer and poisoned the atmosphere. And within months, the human race was dying in numbers too large to comprehend. They had no ships capable of evacuation, no technology to repair what had been broken, no hope at all. And then the Valorians had come. They had appeared in Earth's sky like silver angels, offering salvation in exchange for what they called a fair price. And desperate humanity had agreed without truly understanding what they were signing. The atmospheric purifiers had worked. The terraforming seeds had healed the wounded Earth, and the evacuation ships had carried millions to safety on colony worlds. But the price had been measured in gratitude units, a currency that bound humanity to galactic law in ways that made them less than equal. Humans could not vote in council matters, could not refuse labor contracts on alien worlds, could not say no when their soldiers were conscripted to fight in wars that had nothing to do with Earth. They were a ward species, a term that meant something close to owned in the old languages of the galaxy. Does the human representative wish to make a statement regarding their species' progress toward debt fulfillment? Saluvis asked, and his tone made it clear he expected nothing of Alara stepped forward, her boots clicking against the ancient stone. "The people of Earth thank the Council for their patience," she said, and the words tasted like ash. "We continue to honor our obligations and remain grateful for the salvation provided to us in our time of need." The lies came easily now, worn smooth by years of repetition. What she wanted to say was different. What she wanted to scream was that gratitude had limits, that 200 years of service should mean something, that her people were not animals to be bought and sold. But she said none of this. Instead, she stood in silence as Saluvis moved on to other business, dismissing humanity's shame as casually as one might brush dust from a sleeve. The session lasted for hours, filled with trade agreements and territorial disputes and all the machinery of galactic governance. And through it all, Alara waited when it finally ended and the representatives began to disperse. She felt a presence at her side and turned to find Ambassador Kethis of the Valorian Consortium. He was beautiful in the way that light itself was beautiful, his silver form shifting through patterns that hypnotized if you watched too long. And his voice was soft with something that might have been kindness. "Ambassador Vance, I wanted to express my personal sympathy for your position," he said. "The debt your people carry is heavy, and I know the recitation must be difficult." "Your sympathy is noted," Alara replied, keeping her voice carefully neutral. "I hope you understand that the original agreement was made in good faith." Kethis continued, "We saved your species from extinction, and the price was fair by any reasonable standard." Fair, Alara thought, as if fairness had anything to do with it when you were drowning. "You did not negotiate the terms of the rope thrown to you. You simply grabbed it and prayed." "Of course," she said aloud. "Humanity remembers its debt with every breath we take." Kethis nodded, seemingly satisfied, and drifted away to join his delegation. Ella watched him go. And behind her careful mask, something hard and patient continued to wait. She had received a message 3 days ago, encoded in a way that only human eyes could read. And it had contained just 4 words. "The fleet is ready." Humanity remembered its debt, yes, but perhaps not in the way the Council expected. Perhaps it was time for the galaxy to learn what human gratitude truly looked like. The stars in the Hollow Reach had a different quality than those in civilized space, a coldness that seemed to seep through the hull and settle in the bones of everyone aboard. The HS Remembrance Commander Jonah Mwangi stood at the observation deck and stared into that vast emptiness, his dark hands clasped behind his back and his face carved from years of hard service. Behind him, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, their instruments painting pictures of a region that the Galactic Council had declared safe and empty 300 years ago. The Council had lied. "Commander," Lieutenant Chun called out, her voice tight with controlled fear. "We have confirmed contact on the long-range sensors, and you need to see this." Jonah turned and crossed to her station, his boots heavy on the metal floor. And what he saw on her screen made his blood run cold. The shapes were wrong, twisted things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. And they moved with a purpose that spoke of hunger rather than curiosity. "Vithrak," he said, and the word fell from his lips like a curse. The Vithrak swarm had been the terror of ancient space, a species that consumed worlds and grew stronger with each meal. And the Council had fought them to a standstill 10,000 years ago. They were supposed to be contained, trapped in a prison of dead systems and collapsed jump points, forgotten by a galaxy that had moved on to more pleasant concerns. But the shapes on Lieutenant Chen's screen were not contained. They were hunting. How many? Jonah Astin's fingers moved across her console, and when she looked up her face was pale. Initial count suggests over 2 million individual craft in this sector alone. "Commander, and our deep scans indicate major hive structures in at least 7 systems. 2 million. Jonah thought, And this was just one sector of the Hollow Reach. They have evolved, the ship's science officer reported. A young woman named Dr. Amara Okonkwo, who had spent her career studying X species. The energy signatures do not match any Vithrak patterns in our historical database, which means they have been growing and changing all this time. Growing toward what? Jonah demanded. Dr. Okonkwo pulled up a projection that filled the center of the bridge. A map of the galaxy with the Hollow Reach marked in spreading lines, showing projected expansion at their current rate of growth. The swarm will reach the first inhabited systems within 30 years, Commander, and the core worlds within 50. The bridge fell silent as the weight of that statement settled over them. 50 years until the swarm reached the heart of galactic civilization. 50 years until species that had existed for millions of years faced the same extinction that had almost claimed humanity. Does the Council know? Lieutenant Chen asked. Jonah laughed. And it was not a pleasant sound. Of course they know, Lieutenant. The Council knows everything that happens in their precious galaxy. He moved to his command chair and pulled up the classified files that human intelligence had stolen from Valorian archives. Files that had cost the lives of 6 good agents they have known for 200 years. He continued, his voice hard as stone. They've been tracking the swarm's evolution since before they saved Earth from the gamma burst. The crew stared at him, confusion and horror mixing on their faces. Then why have they not acted? Dr. Okonkwo asked. Jonah brought up another file. This one showing shipping manifests and construction contracts, hidden behind layers of corporate secrecy. Because they are not planning to fight, he said. They are planning to run. The documents told a story of massive generation ships being built in secret, of supply caches hidden in distant systems, of evacuation plans that included only the elder species and their chosen favorites, the younger civilizations, the ones who had not yet earned a place at the high table. They would be left behind. 4,000 species, Jonah said quietly. 4,000 peoples who will never see the danger coming because the Council has decided they are not worth saving. Lieutenant Chen rose from her seat, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. We have to tell someone. Commander, we have to warn them. Who would believe us? Jonah replied. We are humans, a ward species, a people who still owe a debt we can never repay. And a word means nothing against the Council's authority. He stood and faced his crew. These men and women who had volunteered for a mission into unknown space because they believed in something larger than themselves. But there is another option. He pulled up one final file. This one, bearing the seal of the human Admiralty and marked with classification codes that should have been impossible for him to access for 80 years. Our people have been building something in secret, he said. Something the Council does not know about. Something that could change the fate of the galaxy. The file opened to reveal schematics, thousands of them, showing warships of a design no alien eye had ever seen. Project Prometheus, Jonah continued. 10,000 vessels hidden in the deep black, crewed by volunteers who understand that humanity's debt cannot be measured in units or years. Dr. Okonkwo studied the schematics with growing wonder. These ships, Commander, they are not built for defense or negotiation. They are built for war, Jonah finished for her. Real war. The kind our ancestors fought when survival was the only victory that mattered. He transmitted his findings to the Remembrances Communication Array, encoding them in frequencies that only human receivers could detect. I am sending everything we have learned to Earth, he said. The Admiralty will decide what happens next. But I believe I already know what their answer will be. Lieutenant Chen looked at the spreading red stain on the galaxy map, at the billions of lives that hung in the balance. We are going to fight them, are we not? She asked. Jonah nodded slowly. The Council saved us when we were dying. And even if they did it for selfish reasons, even if they wrapped chains around us and called it kindness, We're still alive because of them. He turned back to the observation deck. To the cold stars of the hollow reach, humanity pays its debts. Lieutenant, and we pay them in our own way, in the distance. Something vast and hungry moved through the darkness, unaware that it had been seen, unaware that somewhere far away, a species it never heard of was preparing to meet it. The Vithrak swarm had forgotten what it meant to be hunted. They were about to remember. The Ur cloud was cold beyond human understanding, a graveyard of ice and stone that drifted at the edge of the solar system. Where the sun was just another star among millions, it was also the perfect place to hide an armada director. Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation platform of Station Prometheus and watched the ships come alive. Row after row of dark metal giants waking from their long sleep. She was 73 years old, and she had given 50 of those years to this moment. Final diagnostics complete on sectors 7 through 12. Her assistant reported. A young man named Marcus, who had been born on this station and had never seen Earth. All vessels report green across the board. Director. Yuki nodded without taking her eyes from the view. 10,000 warships filled the void before her. Each one a monument to human stubbornness and human ingenuity. Each one built from salvaged materials and stolen knowledge and the sweat of generations who believed in a future they would never see. The Council had mocked human engineering since the day of first contact, calling it crude and wasteful and lacking in elegance. They did not understand that crude was the point. A Valorian warship was a work of art, beautiful and efficient and designed to win battles with minimal loss of life on either side. A human warship was designed to win battles, no matter the cost. Where Council vessels carried precision weapons meant to disable and capture, human ships carried weapons meant to destroy. Where Council shields were calibrated to protect against specific frequencies of attack. Human armor was simply thick enough to absorb whatever came in. It was not sophisticated, but sophistication was a luxury that humanity had never been able to afford. Director, Marcus said, we are receiving a priority transmission from Earth. Encryption level Omega. Yuki finally turned from the view and made her way to the communications center, her aged bones protesting every step, but her spirit burning with an energy that had not dimmed in 50 years. The message was from President Adara Obi, the woman who carried the weight of Earth on her shoulders, and her face was grim on the screen. Director Tanaka, the president said, I assume you have received Commander Mwangi's report from the Hollow Reach. I have, Yuki replied. The swarm is larger than we feared, but that does not change our purpose. No, it does not, the president agreed. The Admiralty has made its decision, and I have given my authorization. She paused, and in that pause Yuki saw the cost of leadership, the terrible weight of sending millions to die. You are cleared to launch Project Prometheus, the president continued. May God forgive us for what we are about to do. The transmission ended, and Yuki stood in silence for a long moment. Then she activated the station-wide broadcast. All hands. A voice rang out through corridors that had never heard sunlight. This is Director Tanaka speaking. In engine rooms and weapons bays, in mess halls and sleeping quarters, 6 million volunteers stopped what they were doing and listened. For 80 years, we have worked in secret, Yuki continued. We have hidden in the darkness while our brothers and sisters on Earth labored under a debt they did not deserve. She thought of her grandmother, who had been one of the first workers on Station Prometheus, who had died without ever seeing what her sacrifice would build. We did this because we knew the truth, that the galaxy is not as safe as the Council pretends, that there are threats they have chosen to ignore, that billions of innocent lives depend on someone being willing to fight. The shipyards hummed with energy as reactors came online and navigation systems locked onto coordinates that had been calculated decades ago. Today, That fight begins. She pulled up the mission briefing on every screen in the station, showing the path they would take through unmapped space, through regions the Council had never bothered to explore, all the way to the heart of the Vithrek swarm. "We will not ask for permission," Yuki said. "We will not wait for the Council to save us or anyone else. And we will not measure our payment in units or years." Around her, the first ships began to move, sliding out of their docking cradles and forming into fleets that stretched across the void. "We will measure it in blood," she continued, "in sacrifice, in the lives of those willing to stand between the darkness and everyone it would devour." She watched the flagship, HS Defiance, take its place at the head of the formation, its hull black against the stars, its weapons cold but ready. "Some of us will not return. Perhaps most of us will not return. But those who survive will carry a message back to the Council and to every species that has ever looked down on humanity." The fleet began to accelerate, 10,000 ships moving as one toward a destination that should have been impossible to reach. That message is simple. We remember what was done for us. We remember the salvation we were given, and we repay our debts not because we are ordered to, but because that is who we are. In the command center of Station Prometheus, the screen showed the fleet growing smaller as it rushed toward fold space, toward the darkness at the edge of everything. "Good luck, my children," Yuki whispered, too quiet for anyone to hear. "Show them what humanity is worth." 2 days later, Ambassador Kethis of the Valorian Consortium arrived on Earth to inquire about unusual energy readings from the outer solar system president. Obi met him with a smile that revealed nothing. "Mining operations," she said. "We have recently expanded our resource extraction efforts in the Orc cloud." Kethis studied her face, searching for deception. But humans had learned long ago how to hide their thoughts from alien eyes. "Of course," he said finally. "I meant no offense. It is simply that the readings were quite substantial." "We are an industrious people," the president replied. "Even with our debt, we find ways to improve ourselves." Kethis nodded and departed, satisfied that the ward species was behaving as expected. Did not notice the small smile that crossed the president's face as he left. Did not know that somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, 10,000 human warships were racing toward a battle that would change the galaxy forever. The Silent Armada had launched, and nothing would ever be the same. The Vithrek Nexus hung in space like a wound in reality, a mass of living ships and organic structures that pulsed with a hunger older than human. Civilization Admiral Jonah Mwanji stood on the bridge of the HS Defiance and looked upon the enemy. And for the first time in his life, he understood what true evil looked like. "All ships report ready." "Admiral," Captain Yolanda Reyes said from her station, her voice steady despite the terror that must have been clawing at her heart. 10,000 vessels awaiting your command." Jonah studied the tactical display, watching the swarm ships move in patterns that no computer could predict. Billions of individual creatures acting as extensions of a single vast mind. The Hive Queen was out there somewhere, the intelligence that controlled it all, and she had ruled this region of space for longer than humanity had existed today. "That would end. Open a channel to all ships," Jonah ordered. The communication officer nodded. And suddenly Jonah's voice was reaching 6 million human souls scattered across 10,000 vessels. "You all know why we are here," he said. "You all know what waits for us and what it will cost to destroy it." He thought of his wife back on Earth, of the children he might never see grow up, of all the small precious things he was about to sacrifice. "The Council believes we are a lesser species," he continued. "They believe that humans lack the courage to face true darkness, that we are fit only to serve and to pay debts we can never escape." Around the fleet, weapon systems came online and shields powered up. The accumulated fury of a species preparing to prove the universe wrong. Today we show them the truth. Today we fight not because we were asked, not because we were ordered, but because it is right." He drew a deep breath. "All ships, attack!" The fleet surged forward, 10,000 engines burning bright against the endless dark. And the swarm rose to meet them. What followed was slaughter. The Vithrak fought with the mindless ferocity of creatures that knew nothing but consumption. Their ships slamming into human vessels with no regard for their own survival. Their weapons tearing through armor and hull and flesh. The HSS Courage was the first to die, rammed by a swarm dreadnought 3 times its size. Its reactor going critical in a flash of light that took a dozen enemy ships with it. Then the HSS Brotherhood fell. Then the HSS New Mumbai. Then the HSS Last Stand. The names scrolled across Jonah's display faster than he could read them. A litany of sacrifice that grew longer with every passing minute. "Admiral," Captain Reyes called out, "we have lost 1,200 ships. Casualties are approaching 40%. 40%. Jonah thought any council fleet would have retreated at 15. Would have calculated the acceptable losses and decided this battle was not worth winning. But humanity had not come this far to retreat. Press the attack. He ordered. All ships maintain formation and advance. The Defiance shuddered as a swarm raider crashed against its shields. And Jonah grabbed the arm of his chair to keep from falling around him. The bridge crew worked with desperate efficiency, rerouting power and patching systems, and doing everything possible to keep their ship alive for one more minute on the tactical display. He watched human ships die in clusters, watched pilots make suicide runs against swarm command vessels, watched gunners fire until their weapons melted, and then find new ways to cause destruction. It was brutal and ugly, and nothing like the elegant warfare the council practiced. But it was working. The swarm was dying too. "Admiral," the communications officer reported, "we are receiving a transmission. Origin point is the Nexus itself." Jonah felt a chill run down his spine. "Put it through." The voice that filled the bridge was not sound in any human sense, but something that pressed directly against the mind. "Ancient and vast and utterly alien small creatures," the Hive Queen said. "You are not the ones we threatened. Your worlds lie far from our path. Why do you fight?" Jonah stood, facing the viewport as if he could see the Queen herself in the chaos of battle. "Because someone has to," he replied. "We would have passed your species by," the Queen continued. "You owe the galaxy nothing. The ones who rule Ita have made you their servants. Their slaves. Why die for those who despise you?" It was a fair question. Jonah realized a question that many humans had asked over the past 2 centuries. Why serve those who look down on you? Why sacrifice for those who would never acknowledge your worth? Why pay a debt that could never be satisfied? "You are right," he said. "We owe them nothing." He thought of Earth, of the moment when the Valorian ships had appeared in the sky, of the salvation that had come with chains attached. "But someone helped us once," he continued. "When we were dying and had no hope, someone reached out and saved us. And we swore we would never forget what that meant." He activated his own transmission, broadcasting on every frequency so that every human ship could hear. "We do not fight because we owe the Council. We fight because we remember what it felt like to face extinction. And we will not let others face that same despair." The Hive Queen's presence seemed to pulse with something that might have been confusion. "You will all die," she said. "Perhaps," Jonah replied. "But you will die first." He turned to his crew. "All ships. Target the Nexus core. Everything we have left, fire." The remains of the human fleet converged on the heart of the swarm, their weapons blazing with the last of their power. Their ships broken and burning, but still moving forward, the Defiance led the charge. Its hull torn open in a dozen places, its engines failing, its crew dying at their stations, but they did not stop. The final volley struck the Nexus like the fist of an angry god. punching through organic armor and detonating deep within the Queen's chamber. There was a moment of perfect silence. Then the Nexus exploded. The shockwave tore through the swarm fleet, shattering ships and scattering debris across light years of space. And the creatures that had moved with such terrible purpose suddenly went still. The Hive Queen was dead. And without her guiding mind, the swarm was nothing but meat and metal drifting in the void on the bridge of the Defiance. Jonah slumped in his chair and watched the destruction spread of 10,000 ships. 847 remained of 6 million volunteers. Fewer than 2 million still lived. It was the costliest victory in human history. And it was the most important. Admiral, Captain Reyes said softly, "What do we do now?" Jonah looked at the stars, at the empty space where humanity's greatest enemy had been. "We go home," he said, "and we tell the Council what we have done." 3 months after the Battle of the Screaming Dark, Ambassador Alara Vance walked into the Galactic Council chambers for the final time. She was not alone. Behind her came 400 human veterans, men and women who bore the scars of a war the Council had never expected them to fight. Their uniforms marked with burns and tears and patches covering wounds that would never fully heal. Some walked with crutches. Some were pushed in hover chairs. Some were missing limbs or eyes or pieces of themselves that no technology could replace. But they walked with their heads high. And they walked together. The chamber fell silent as they entered. Hundreds of alien species watching the procession with expressions that ranged from confusion to fear to something that might have been shame. Archon Saluvis rose from his throne, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. "Ambassador Vance," he said, "this is highly irregular. The debt recitation is a formal ceremony. And these individuals have no place here." "These individuals," Alara replied, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "have earned their place here more than anyone else in this room." She walked to the central podium, the same podium where she had stood so many times before with her head bowed and her spirit crushed. And this time she stood tall. "Before we begin the recitation," she said, "I have information that the Council needs to see." She activated a holographic display, and the chamber filled with images and data that made the assembled representatives gasp. "This is the Vithrak Swarm," Alara continued, "an enemy that the Council declared contained and forgotten 300 years ago. The images showed the Nexus in all its terrible glory, showed the billions of swarm ships that had been growing in the darkness, showed projections of their expansion path straight toward the core worlds. The Council knew," Alara said. "The Council has known for 2 centuries that the swarm was evolving, growing, preparing to consume the galaxy." She pulled up the classified evacuation plans, the secret construction of generation ships, the lists of species that would be saved, and the longer lists of those who would be abandoned. And the Council was planning to run. The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouting accusations and denials. Ancient rivalries flaring as species turned on each other with questions. They had never thought to ask. Ambassador Kethis of the Valorians rose, his silver form trembling with what might have been anger or might have been fear. "These documents are fabricated," he declared. "Human lies designed to discredit the Council and escape your rightful obligations. Are they?" Alara asked. She gestured to the veterans behind her, to the broken bodies and the haunted eyes that had seen the truth of the swarm firsthand. 3 months ago, the human fleet Project Prometheus engaged the Vithrak Swarm at their home system, she said. 10,000 ships, 6 million volunteers, against an enemy that had been growing in power for millennia. She showed them the battle footage, the desperate fighting and the terrible losses, and the moment when the Nexus finally died. 4 million humans did not return from that battle, Alara continued. 4 million sons and daughters and parents and friends who gave everything they had to destroy a threat that the Council refused to face. The chamber was silent now, every eye fixed on the images of sacrifice that played across the holographic display. "The Hive Queen is dead," Alara said. "The swarm is broken, and the galaxy is safe because humans chose to fight when no one asked them to." She turned to face Archon Saluvis directly, and for the first time in her life she saw uncertainty in those ancient crystalline eyes. "You measured our debt in units," she said. "In numbers on a ledger, in years of servitude, in the sweat and blood of generations who worked to pay back what we owed." She reached into her coat and pulled out a single data chip, small enough to fit in the palm of her hand. "This contains everything we learned about the Vithrak, their weaknesses, their patterns, the secrets of their technology, and everything you need to ensure they never rise again." She placed the chip on the podium. "We give it freely." Saluvis stared at the chip as if it might bite him. "Ambassador, I do not understand. Your people sacrificed millions, and you ask for nothing in return?" "We are not asking," Alara said. "We are telling." She stepped away from the podium and walked among the veterans, touching shoulders and clasping hands, connecting with the men and women who had survived the impossible. "Humanity's debt is not repaid because we destroyed your enemy," she said. "It is repaid because we chose to become what you only pretended to be." She turned back to face the chamber, her voice rising with every word. "You call yourselves the protectors of galactic civilization, the guardians of peace and order, the elder species who guide the younger toward enlightenment." She shook her head slowly. "But when the darkness came, you planned to run. You planned to save yourselves and leave 4,000 species to die. And you never thought to ask if anyone else might be willing to fight." The silence that followed was deeper than space itself. "Humans were willing," Alara continued. "Humans who owed you nothing but a debt measured in suffering. Humans who had every reason to hate you and none to help you. Those humans chose to give their lives for strangers they would never meet." She drew herself up to her full height, small by the standards of the great beings around her, but burning with something they could not match. "That is what repayment looks like. Not numbers on a ledger, not years of labor, not bowing and scraping before those who think themselves superior." She began to walk toward the exit, the veterans falling into formation behind her. "Repayment is giving everything you have because it is right, because others gave for you, because the measure of a species is not what they take from the stars, but what they are willing to give." She paused at the doorway and looked back at the chamber one final time. "There is no debt," she said. "There never was. There was only a lesson you forgot and a species young enough to remember it." Archon Saluvis rose, his voice trembling in a way no one had ever heard before. "Ambassador, the debt recitation." "There will be no recitation," Alara cut him off. "Not today, not ever again." And then she walked out, and the veterans followed her, and the great chamber of the Galactic Council sat in silence. No one spoke, no one moved for the first time in 10,000 years of galactic history. The beings who ruled the stars had nothing to say, and somewhere far away, in the cold darkness where 4 million humans had given their lives, the stars continued to burn, unchanged by the politics of lesser creatures, eternal and patient and beautiful. 1 year later, the Council abolished the gratitude unit system. A memorial was built in the Hollow Reach, a ring of light around the dead sun bearing 4 million names, and across the galaxy, a new phrase entered the common language. To pay as the humans paid, it meant to give everything. Expect nothing, and silence your critics with grace. It meant to be human.